love the gospel of the Lord.
Heart to Heart, a Catholic media ministry, presents an inspiring gospel reflection by Father Michael Sparrow. Father Michael is a Jesuit priest working as a writer and retreat master at the Bellarmine Jesuit Retreat House outside Chicago.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. As Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside by themselves and said to them on the way, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and scourged and crucified. And he will be raised on the third day." Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee approached Jesus with her sons and did him homage, wishing to ask for him something. He said to her, "What do you wish?" She answered him, "Command that these 2 sons of mine sit one at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." Jesus said in reply, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the chalice that I am going to drink?" They answered, "We can." He replied, "My chalice you will indeed drink, but to sit at my right or my left, that is not mine to give. But it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." When the 10 heard this, they became indignant at the 2 brothers. But Jesus summoned them and said, "You know the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and the great ones make their authority felt. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you shall be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave. Just so the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord. Aside from the Passion itself, few Gospels cut to the heart of the Lenten journey, besides this Gospel from Matthew chapter 20, verses 17 through 28. It's a familiar text for many of us, isn't it? The prelude to the dialogue is particularly instructive here. Jesus is going up to Jerusalem, and he's under no illusions as to what is in store for him. In fact, this is one of his predictions of the Passion. He says very directly to the 12 disciples, "We're going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man," clearly a reference to himself, "is going to be handed over, crucified, mocked, and will be raised on the third day." His prediction of his passion and resurrection. There's some truths that are just so horrendous and so hard to hear that we just close out our minds, our hearts, our ears, our eyes, and we just don't want to take it in. Denial can be a wonderful psychological mechanism to protect ourselves from impending pain. And that seems to be the case here with the 12 apostles, because nobody questions Jesus about it. There's no comments. Jesus puts it out there, it just falls to the ground. To make matters worse, of course, the mother of James and John, approaches and asks for a teeny weeny, teensy little favor. Jesus said, "What do you have in mind?" "Oh, that my sons can sit at your right and left." Can't you just see Jesus going, "What did I just say? What's going to happen? What are we about?" But of course, isn't that us? Aren't we like James and John? Aren't we like the mother of James and John? Yeah, Jesus, okay, you're going to suffer and there are going to be a lot of terrible things, but what about me? What about my kids? What about my husband? What about my wife? What about my grandchildren? Yeah, I know there's, but what about me? What about us? Jesus puts it in the context of, can you drink this chalice? In other words, Jesus ties the glory of God's kingdom to the ability to be able to suffer for love. If you've been married, if you've raised children, if you've lived within a family, if you're a human being, you know that the reality is that to love is to suffer. There's no love that is not going to take us up to Jerusalem, that is not going to take us on a path of suffering. It's an inevitable course. And so Jesus asked this question, can you drink the chalice? James and John naively answer, yes, we can. And of course, they have no idea what's in store for them. Just as every married couple that walks up the aisle and says, I'm going to be with you in good times and in bad times, in sickness and health, till death do us part, yes. I married one couple several years ago, and as we were meeting in the marriage preparation, it was kind of a whirlwind romance, and I knew that their eyes were rather starry and filled with romance. And I said, now this is a serious commitment. Do you understand what you're undertaking here? And they looked at each other and they held each other's hands and gazed with those gooey eyes of love. Oh, yes. And they were very faith-filled, and they said, we just take whatever sufferings, whatever hardships are in store, because we know God is going to give us the grace to be able to endure those. Well, thank goodness their marriage has lasted, but over the last 25 years, every time we get together, they said, oh, Father Michael, we had no idea what you were talking about when you asked us that question. We had no idea. It's kind of a running joke every time I see them. Every pathway of love is marked by suffering. Can we drink that chalice? Are we willing to drink the chalice, or do we simply push it aside and say, I want all the benefits, I want all the glory, but I don't want any of the suffering, I don't want any of the pain. And Jesus says, sorry, they come together. You want to be faithful in love, you got to drink the chalice. You want to sit with me at my right hand and my left, you have to drink the chalice. You want to be transformed into a saint, you have to drink the chalice. You want to grow beyond your own ego, beyond your own narrow confines, beyond your own kingdom, you got to drink the chalice. Would that there was some other pathway to transformation. Would that there was some easier way to just say a few prayers and be escorted into the heavenly kingdom. But the pattern of Jesus' life, and it's the reason why the church every year has this holy season of Lent, is we're not just remembering what Jesus did for us 2,000 years ago. Yes, absolutely. But we're remembering it so that when that pattern is enacted in our own life, we don't despair, we don't give up. That as the Father was faithful to Jesus and gave him the strength to be able to pick up his cross and to be confident that the Father would raise him from the dead, So we keep our eyes fixed on the Lord so that when we are picking up our cross and walking in the footsteps of Jesus, we believe that it is death unto life and that it's transforming us. God takes no delight in watching us suffer, but God does delight in watching us being transformed. And there doesn't seem to be any other way for us to grow beyond our own selfishness, our inherent arrogance, our own inherent self-centeredness, which is so epitomized in the gospel here, with the mother of James and John. And then the other 10, when they hear about the plottings and the connivings that are going on, they said, hey, that's not fair for them. What about us? This affects all of us. It doesn't matter whether you're single or married or divorced, gay or straight, whether you're religious or priest, young or old. This gospel is for all of us. It's about this process of allowing the death and resurrection of Jesus to be lived out within our own lives. Jesus is the one who points the way. Jesus is the one who gives us the strength not to give in to discouragement, not to give in to despair, not to be afraid, because Jesus has promised, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to run out on you. I'm going to be there for you every step of the way. You've heard me say many times, my favorite name for Jesus is Emmanuel. It's the name given to him as a child. And it's the very last word of Matthew's gospel. I will be with you always, Emmanuel. But it's part of the reason why we as Roman Catholics, in contrast to the Protestant churches, like to see the corpus, the body of Christ, on the crucifix. You go into a Protestant church, what do you see? An empty cross. And that's a sign of victory. Jesus has been raised from the dead. And there's power in that symbolism. But I prefer our Roman Catholic symbolism much more, of looking on that crucifix and you see the body of Jesus there, and he says, I am Emmanuel, I am with you. I know how hard it is. I know the heartbreak. I know how difficult it is to remain faithful in love. I know what a struggle it is to be able to try and raise children. I know how difficult it is to try and labor day after day to provide for your family. I know the uncertainty of living with the volatility of a stock market that is going up and down. I know the anxiety and the pain of living with a virus that we don't know whether it's going to be contained or not. I know the uncertainty of not knowing whether you're going to have a job in the future. I know the uncertainty of whether I'm going to be able to provide for my medical needs of my parents or my own medical needs when I get older. I know that uncertainty. I know that pain. I am Emmanuel. I am with you. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Because, of course, when that question is asked, can you drink this cup? It's like, whoa. And all the fears threaten to overwhelm us. What Jesus says over and over again, what we hear in the scripture over and over again, and isn't it why we gather together day after day, week after week, is to stare down fear, because fear is a liar. It robs us of hope. It robs us of joy. It fractures our relationships. It focuses us in on ourselves. Fear is a liar. It doesn't speak the truth. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. We meditate on his holy passion, death, and resurrection, so that when this suffering is asked of us, when the chalice of Jesus is handed to us, we don't despair. I've talked to several people in the last year who have been facing serious suffering, devout Catholics. And in the face of their suffering, they said, Father Michael, I've thought of taking my own life or moving out west where physician-assisted suicide is legal. Because I just don't know if I can face that suffering. There's no hope for me to be cured. I just want it to be over with. I just want it to be done. That place of despair knocks at all of our hearts. This gospel, this Lenten season, invites us to contemplate, is there something to be gained from redemptive suffering? In embracing that suffering that is inevitably going to come into our lives and unite it with Jesus, unite it with his suffering, so that our own hearts can be transformed. Brothers and sisters, our lives are not our own. We are not the masters of our own destiny. This gift of life is just that, it's a gift. And how long we walk on this earth is not up to us to determine. It is ours to treasure this gift, to protect this life, to the best of our ability to nurture the gifts and the talents that God has given us. But it's God's choice as to how long we're going to be here. Our choice is to keep our eyes fixed on the Lord and believe that as we drink that cup, Jesus will be with us. And his desire is that his life continues to grow fuller and fuller within us. That's our cost for hope. Because the victory is assured. It's not, is Jesus going to defeat Satan or not? No, the victory has already been won. We're moving toward Easter. There is an end to Lent. There is an end to suffering. And that's eternal joy. That's eternal happiness. Suffering is not the last word. Death is not the last word. Defeat is not the last word. Lent is a journey toward preparing for that ultimate joy of Easter. We just need to keep our eyes on the prize and not despair along the way. Amen?
Heart